It gets good later is bullshit. I hate the idea that you are not allowed to dislike a show until you've sat through some arbitrary number of episodes to get to the good parts. This seems to come up a lot for shows that have rabid fan bases who will never allow someone to be merely meh about their favorite show. Any criticism from someone who hasn't watched the whole thing, and probably read the Eleanor manga as well, will be told that they just need to watch more and more of the show in order to finally get it. And presumably then everyone will come to love their show too. There are in fact several layers as to why this almost never holds true, and I'd like to unpack them a little bit. The first and simplest issue is return on investment. Even if a show does get good later, why should you watch a bunch of bad episodes in order to get there instead of watching something that you're enjoying from the get-go? Are the good parts going to actually be so good that they make up for all the shit you had to slip through to get there? That's unlikely. The good parts would need to be an actual 10 out of 10 in order for going through much more 5 out of 10 bits to average out just like a 7 out of 10. It's not that hard to find a show that can equal or beat the level of average quality. Also, you are not missing out by not finishing the series. There are more anime out there than you could ever reasonably watch. By not watching the show that gets good, you can instead watch one or more shows that you actually enjoy throughout. No matter what you watch, someone will tell you that you're missing out by not watching their favorite anime. So saying that you're missing out on X series by dropping it doesn't really mean much. So it doesn't serve as an argument against dropping something that you are enjoying to watch something else. This gets especially dumb for long-running shows where fans will tell you that you need to sit through multiple seasons worth of content before the good parts. The more time you put in, the larger the gamble becomes. If the series gets good in the next episode or two, maybe it's worth risking half an hour of your life to get through to it. But it's a pretty big ask to tell someone that they need to spend hours and hours of their life with no guarantee that it'll ever actually pay off. This leads into the second issue. A bad start is a herald of a bad experience as a whole. The beginning is a critical part of your story. There are presentations and lectures solely devoted to crafting a first chapter, paragraph, or even the first sentence of a work in order to hook the reader in. If you've watched some of an anime and it hasn't gotten you roped in, then it's failed at a pretty core aspect of writing. That's not a good sign that the supposed good bits to come are actually going to be all that good. As mentioned earlier, the good parts need to be really good in order to make up for dragging yourself through the early parts. And a weak start is an indication that the payoff won't be the masterpiece it's made out to be. This is also a good place to point out that enjoyment is subjective. If someone thinks a series is a 10 out of 10 subversive masterpiece and you aren't enjoying it, then y'all likely have different tastes in anime. You know what you like better than some asshole on the internet does, and when someone with different tastes than you says a series gets good, that's unlikely to hold true for you. Combine these two and you get the third and most important point. If you aren't enjoying the series now, you won't appreciate the payoff. The entire argument of it gets good later requires that you have actually liked the beginning. It would be more accurate to say that it gets better later, which is something I will say sometimes. Essentially, stories rely on you getting invested in them for later events to have a good payoff. You fall in love with the character or settings or whatever early on, and that gives the writer the leverage to make you care about what happens later. But if you aren't enjoying yourself, and you aren't going to care when the wham moment comes. So it can be entirely true that a series gets several times better later on, but you multiply 0 and you still end up with 0. The most dangerous thing that someone can say about your story is, I don't care what happens to these people. The story can't really recover from that. A big climactic event isn't going to make you retroactively care about characters that you didn't like up until that point. It can only elevate your appreciation for characters that you already like or appreciate. If you don't care about them, then peril, success, love, death, none of it matters because the viewer doesn't give a shit about the person it's happening to. This also leads back into why the start of a series is so important. Look at Sword Art Online. Its second arc is generally considered the worst part of the series, but it being bad doesn't matter nearly as much as if it was the first arc, because people who watch it have already seen the first arc. They've already had that critical chance to get attached. Sure, plenty of people dropped SAO in season 1 and never came back, but plenty of people could get through it because there have been parts they liked, and that gives them a point of reference. Someone can say X arc is as good or better as the first arc, and they will have a good idea of if that's a high enough bar to get them to sit through ALO for it. They can gauge how much they like the characters and make a more informed decision if that's worth sticking around for. If ALO had happened first, you'd have run into those 8 deadly words before SAO ever improved. People would have checked out, and gluing your eyes open to sit through bad content would only make that disinterest ironclad. Saying that the series gets better isn't going to hold much weight. Why would you care if there's some good character moments for a set of characters you don't care about? Instead, SAO seems to actually nail the introduction. Even people who dislike it will often say that the first episode had promise, but that the series failed to live up to it. So, in short, stop telling people to keep watching shows they don't like. They aren't going to come back and thank you for making them do homework, because they likely aren't going to end up enjoying the good parts. They especially aren't going to enjoy it enough to make up for slogging through the crappy parts to get there. Honestly, I think that this comes up a lot from people who can't seem to accept that someone started a show which they love, but disliked it enough that they dropped it. They must just need to watch more of it and it'll grow on them. This is also why you run into the issue where people will say that a show is perfect, but also say that it gets better later. If you haven't watched the show at all, it's all good. If you have watched a few episodes but you dropped it, you must have just dropped it before it got good. This does not mean you can't say that a show gets better. If someone is on the fence about a series, then saying that the show improves can be a valid point in convincing them to give it a little bit longer. As long as they're getting somewhat invested, then upcoming payoff moments will be able to hit just right. Something I'll say when throwing out Mahoka as a recommendation for people who like Mao Gakuen is that this show requires you to be in a certain mindset, but if you can stand it at the start, it does get better at what it does later on. Well, that's all I've got. Make sure to tell me about how your favorite anime is totally different, and that after 40 episodes, you'll spontaneously realize that you actually loved every minute of it. See ya.